Welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Monday, March 4th, 2024, and this is episode 874 of Living Free in Tennessee. And today's topic is generated from y'all. I got a comment on YouTube from somebody who saw me talking about being garlic self-reliant, which means I grow as much garlic as I need every year. And I grow enough surplus to replant garlic and get garlic. So I basically don't have to buy garlic for the rest of my life if I just keep taking a couple of small steps every year to grow the garlic. And she said, well, I've had a lot of trouble with garlic. So she said, like, what are you doing to achieve that? And I thought, okay, well, garlic has been one of the things that I found very easy to grow, and I related to it really well. And maybe I'm motivated because I really like cooking with garlic. So there's that. I thought, well, usually I would do this show or this topic when it's closer to planting season, which is in the fall. And we are not in the fall right now. Although those of you who listen to me from the Southern Hemisphere, this is probably pretty good timing for you. So at least we have that, right? So I'm doing this for my Southern Hemisphere friends who want to grow garlic. And also because if you decide to add garlic to your life right now, it's perfect because you can plan to order the seed garlic when they become available, which is in the summer, and the rare varieties sell out very quickly. So depending on what kinds of garlic you would like to buy from the seed providers, you may need to get your order in July. It depends on when they launch. Like I have gone into August to order seed garlic that I wanted, and they were already out of the ones I wanted. So it's a good idea if you're going to start garlic and you want to do something like the variety called Music or Chestnut or any of the other fun different varieties you can do. You may want to start thinking about when you're placing your seed order and reach out to companies who sell it and say, when is the best time to place the order? Because what I noticed today is when I went out looking for seed garlic, they don't even have the like, hey, this happens in the summer sign up, or hey, we're sold out, check back later. They just don't have them on their site. So I would definitely reach out to them if you decide to do some rare varieties. I am also going to cover our usual Monday segments, which is Tales from the Prepper Pantry, the shopping report, all of that. We have a new segment today. And that new segment is motivated by me disappointing people. I'm going to talk to you about what you do when you disappoint people. It's just something we don't necessarily talk about much here. So I thought, well, hey, what do you do when you fail people? Because people are important. Okay, before we jump into that, I want to talk about our featured event of today's show. And if you're watching the video, then you get to actually see the featured event of today's show. And it is on March 16th. It's a seed exchange and potluck that is hosted by the Living Free in Tennessee podcast. That's me. And the Homesteaders Alliance of DeKalb County. That's also me. So the backstory on this is that I started doing a monthly meeting with folks in our area just to get a stronger network locally of people who can help each other out, buy tomatoes from each other or whatever it is that we can exchange and learn stuff together. And we chose the first Saturday as our meeting. And then my life fell apart in the fall. And I could not manage having a monthly meeting. So I took a hiatus and we are back. And I thought, what better way to come back than to have a seed exchange, because it is spring. It is spring planting time in Tennessee. And a lot of us save seeds and have way too many seeds that we've saved. And some of us don't have any seeds at all. And we're thinking about going to the store or putting orders in online. Well, why not find out what seeds you actually need before you do that? And I know a lot of you probably already have your seeds, but we're doing a seed exchange. Now, it's a potluck too, so bring something to share. And you also, if you have seeds you want to trade out or give, bring those as well. I will have little packets and pens that we can write on. I also have a metric boat ton of like commercial seeds that somebody gave to me. Ashley gave to me, let's just say who it was. And it's because she sources seeds at the end of last season when they're going to throw them away. She sources them. So I have a bunch of free packets of seeds that people can just take home. So if you want to come, but you don't have seeds to exchange, just come, because you will go home with seeds. And it's a great way to get started. And it can really keep your costs down. Like for me, because of all of these seed exchange and saving seeds, I did spend $40 on seeds this year, which is twice what I spent last year because I wanted to try some new varieties of things. But I basically usually am under $20 a year on seeds that I buy. And that's from going to seed exchanges, that's from saving seeds, all of those things. So that is happening March 16th. If you want to sign up, go to livingfreeintennessee.com, and on the events thing, there's like an events button on the page. You can see all about that. Or if you're in the Homesteaders Alliance of DeKalb County on Facebook, you will also see what like you can RSVP there as well. Okay, I also want to thank our two sponsors of the show today. The first one is Agris Tax Advice. It is tax season, and that is, I'm sharing on the screen something that is not the Agris Tax Advice. He did a webinar about a week ago. It was last Monday, actually. And on the webinar, he talked about how to, plan for your tax advantage accounts, like which ones make sense from you, and you get started with that. Now, if you want to see the recording of that, you can go to agristaxadvice.com/webinar, fill out your first name and email, and enter the room, and you will get access to the recording of that if you couldn't make it live. And it will be available through the end of this month. So I've put the link directly to where you do this in the show notes. If you're listening to this audioly and just want to remember, it's agristaxadvice.com/webinar. And then it will take you to a page where you enter your information. Our second sponsor of today's show is Discount Mylar Bags. Discount Mylar Bags is, in fact, it's funny because today I went out to the roasting shack and I opened my last box of Discount Mylar Bags coffee bags. And that means I need to order the last few boxes of the original order of that Discount Mylar Bags did for Hollow Roast Coffee in 2016. And basically, he reached out to me and said, hey, send me your bags. I'll see if I can beat the price. And here's what they do. They source things in bulk and pass on the savings to you. And then on their website, which is discountmylarbags.com, if you look over in the right hand, there's a navigation that says information, and it has some information about that. But it also has basic information on how do you make a basic food storage plan. How do you size your oxygen absorbers and getting access to those? Food storage accessories, like all of these different things that you can use. But he's put a lot of thought in making sure that you think carefully about how and what you use so that you don't end up with something that's difficult to manage. And I love that about Toby over at Discount Mylar Bags. So you can check that out, discountmylarbags.com. And of course, if you have the need for food storage, it's a great place to go. You know what? When he does a booth at Self-Reliance Festival, you can also go there and just talk to him in detail. He is a wealth of knowledge, which is really funny because when you hear his story, he's like, I don't have anything I can give to the prepper world. Like, I'm not like a badass who goes out with a gun and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, but I do work at a job where I know how to source things in bulk for less money and pass those savings on to people. And at the time he started this, you couldn't get Mylar bags for a reasonable price. So he disrupted that entire industry with his business, which is kind of an interesting thing. Anyway, so that is our second sponsor of the day's show. With that, it is time for us to move into our first segment. Oh, no, live stream schedule. Live stream. I will be live Tuesday, 9:30 with Jack Spirko and John Willis for our first Tuesday live. So it's different. It's not 12:30. It's 9:30 a.m. Wednesday at 2 p.m. I've got Jessica Kraft on, who's going to talk about wild crafting. I know a lot of you are going to be really interested in that. Thursday at 7, we have our Self-Reliance Festival live. That's 7 p.m. And then Friday at 9:30 a.m. Homestead happenings. Now it's time for Tales from the Prepper Pantry. And if you ever just want to keep up on the live stream schedule and other information, guys, I've got a weekly newsletter that's called the Monday Mail. It goes out on Monday. It's just once a week. I sent a survey out last week saying, hey, do you guys prefer this once a week or like every time I release a show like we used to do? And I've only gotten feedback saying people prefer it once a week. So thanks for replying to that and letting me know. We had totally redone the Monday Mail at the end of last year based on a survey we sent to people who subscribe to see what they want. And we added some resources like a recipe of the week, a homesteading tip, some community news and that sort of stuff. And the people who replied to me really liked it. Nobody replied to me and said, I hate this. That's probably because anybody who didn't like it unsubscribed, I would assume. But if you haven't signed up for that, go to livingfreeintennessee.com. That is how you have the latest information all in one handy place, one time a week. I rarely send another email out. The only time I ever do is if something big happens that I think people would want to know. Like if, I don't know, if I can't even think. Let's say everybody wanted to go to Homesteaders of America and they were sold out. And then they opened up 10 tickets at 10% of the usual cost. And they told me, your listeners can get tickets at 10% of the cost. I'd probably send an email about that because I'm pretty sure people who subscribe to that would want to know that information. Anyway, Tales from the Prepper Pantry. This is where we talk about storing what you use and using what you store. For those of you on the video, I am drinking from my Guantanamo Bay cup. It's Guantanamo Bay, Cuba Beach Club. San, san, san. This cup was a gift from somebody who worked there. I probably should have said from somebody who stayed there, which would have just kept it more ambiguous. But it's something I choose this cup on mornings when I've got a fight. And today I am fighting myself for doing what's most important for long-term benefit, despite the fact I have some pretty urgent things going on, which are short-term important, but 20 years from now, if they don't ever get done, I'll be okay. And some of the long-term things, if they don't get done 20 years from now, I'll actually care. And so this is just reminding me to keep my eye on the ball. Hopefully I'll be able to get some of the urgent things off my plate because the way my ADHD brain works is I'm hyperfixated on one in particular. And it is, it's always there. And despite the fact it's always there, I need to be doing something else. And then when I have my extra time at the end of the day, which always happens when I'm tired, I actually can work on the thing I'm hyperfixated on. It's something I can do without a lot of brain power. So I'm keeping my brain power for the time I'm at my peak. And then at the end of the day, doing the thing that I'm hyperfixated on. And this is very hard for somebody like me to do. So I got my Guantanamo Bay mug to remind me to fight and to fight smart today. Anyway, this segment started because when I first started the podcast, people were fascinated by how I managed my pantry. And I thought, well, this just is something that evolved because I live so far from grocery stores. Like you got to think about what's in there or you don't have it. And then over the years, it evolved into a system that I eventually codified in a presentation called the Power Pantry Method. And there is one of you who's been wanting to buy this webinar from me for a long time. And let's just say it is now available for you. The way you get access, person who wanted this, you know who you are, is you send me an email. And I know you have before, but I'm actually ready to connect you with the actual thing now. So it took me a little while because it was a very long webinar to get it loaded where I needed it loaded for you to have access to it. And that took me, I think she's been asking for 5 months. So she may not even need it anymore, but I'm throwing that out there now just so you know. I am doing a presentation on the Power Pantry Method at the Kentucky Sustainable Living Expo, which is this month in Bowling Green, Kentucky. KentuckySustainableLiving.com will get you tickets. Tickets are like not very expensive, $35. And I'm pretty sure if you use the coupon code email25, you get 25% off if that coupon code still works. As of last Thursday, it still worked. So check that out. It's going to be a fun one. I haven't done a pantry presentation in a while, and it has changed. I have changed the approach to how I talk about pantry management from when I first gave this presentation at the Back to the Land Festival years ago now. You're going to love it. Also, if you're hearing this and you're like, that sounds neat, and I have pictures of really cool ways that people organize their pantry, I'm looking for pantry porn pictures, as I call them, like different creative ways that people store their food. Or if you have a root cellar and you want to send me a picture, shoot it to me, because during that presentation, I want to show pictures of what different people do to spark ideas. Because what happens when people start managing their pantry is they get frustrated because they can't figure out where to put everything, and they end up with towers of boxes and whatnot everywhere and a mess, and they can't find stuff. Very normal part of the process for a lot of people. And so just showing them ways that people store their stuff helps them say, "Oh, I'm going to take this element of that and that element of this and put them together for me." And that's helped me a lot too. And I'm also in the middle of redoing my prepper pantry, like from a construction standpoint. And so I want to see what you guys do too to steal ideas for myself. So, I mean, like one of my favorite ones is, and I have this picture. My friend has a city house and he has transformed his pool and backyard into a vast automated food growing thing. Like he has his pool is now a pond and he has aquaponics hooked up to that and he can go out and catch fish for dinner out of the pond and it's really cool. And so he ends up with a surplus of stuff and he stores things. And he ended up because of he's living in like a normal city house that doesn't have a pantry space. Okay. But he got to thinking about how his house was organized, and he has this one part of this house that's like a couple, I think it's 2 or 3 bedrooms, I don't know, and a bathroom. Like, you know how parents lived in one place with the master bath and then the kids had rooms? Like it's one of those styles of homes. And it has a long hallway, which is, however wide hallways are, which is like door, wall, door, wall, door, wall. And what he did, and then the other wall is mostly just wall. So it's not wide enough to put furniture in, but he figured out because he stores most of his pantry stuff in mason jars that he could build a single mason bar jar wide shelf with a little piece of trim on it to keep the jars from falling out, right? And line up floor to ceiling mason jars. And it doesn't really impact anything in his house as far as storage is like, it's not like, well, I had to take the sofa out so I could put my pantry in, right? It's literally just using a space that wasn't that well used anyway for storage. And I've always loved that idea because it's something almost everybody can do if they have a hallway. Like even I could do it. I'm looking out the door. Like I have it's almost like a foyer area where you go from my living room to the bathroom, bedroom. So it's like a little square. And there's a closet in there that's my linen closet where I keep linens and backup toiletry items or whatever, and first aid and all of that stuff, sheets, linens, towels. But there are 2 walls here that are bare that I could totally put a single like floor to ceiling single mason jar shelf thing in, and it would impact 0% of my ability to walk in and out. The only thing that would cause any challenge with, because of the shape of getting furniture in and out, is to get furniture in and out, I would have to take the shelves down. So if I build it, what I have to keep in mind is that I want the shelves removable. So I want them, like sitting on a bracket of some sort that's on a track. So that's an example of pantry porn, as I call it. So shoot me your pictures if you have any, or if you found some really cool stuff online that you like. Like I love the mason jar, like from the lid tracks. Those are kind of cool looking. All of that stuff. I love having pictures. You can email them, Nicole@livingfreeintennessee.com. Or yeah, just do that because you can't send an attachment on my contact form. Also, I started thinking about the phases of the homestead pantry because some of you haven't started your homestead journey yet. Some of you are only a year in. Some of you have been homesteading longer than I have. And I think it's a natural evolution where you sort of have this beginning phase where you realize, gosh, I'm producing all this food and I need to put it somewhere, and how do I store it? Like that's one thing. And I think the way to successfully navigate the beginning phase is to start documenting what you use and storing what you use. Because one of the common mistakes that happens is people start storing things because they're cheap, like beans and rice. If you don't eat beans and rice, why are you storing beans and rice? If you don't have a reason, you should not. You should not. It's the same with your garden. Like you go out there, you grow all the radishes, you eat your first radish from your garden. Like, I actually don't like radishes. Well, certainly don't store your surplus radishes that year. Like what you've learned from this is next year I'm not growing radishes if you don't like radishes. I actually like radishes. I actually like radishes and stew instead of potatoes, by the way. but you learn this through experience. The other thing that happens in this phase is you go from like, where do I put it all, to starting to figure that out. And if you document what you use, every week in a journal. Over time, you'll just sort of start seeing trends. Now, I am not a person who maintains that kind of documentation every week consistently. Just not, I have embraced that that's not me. So I will commit to doing it for a month, and then I will look at that and I will learn from that. And then another random month that's a different month, another time I'll do the same thing from time to time, just as a tune up. Okay. So you don't like if you're the methodical person, Letty, who can do this every week, Letty, then do it. Go for it. You'll learn a lot. If you're more like me, messy, then commit to a certain amount of time and you'll get it done. And the other thing you can do if you're like really worried about storing up some stuff that's useful is sit down and think, what do you think you eat in a month as a family, and what do you consume as far as soap and that sort of thing, and write that list. And then go out and stock up if you want to. This is where my friend Jack Spirko's copy canning method is really cool. Like once you have a list of what you use when you're shopping, you can buy 2 of a thing that stores well every week if you're a weekly shopper, and it doesn't like hit your budget as hard as going out and dropping $1,000 on extra food stores. So that's a really budget friendly way to do it. I actually transitioned in the beginning method as a result of doing some documentation, thinking about what we actually use. I got to the point where I could grocery shop one time a month, and that saved me a ton of money because I did not get tempted by things at the store that I did not need because I was not there looking at them. And that made us healthier eaters, and that made my budget happier. So what happens is then you go into this intermediate phase of pantry management where you realize I've learned some skills. So instead of buying bread at the store, I've learned how to bake bread. And now what I need to store is not loaves of bread, right? It's flour and yeast and salt. It's starting to transition into maybe some feed for my animals, right? Like you start getting more raw ingredients during this time. You also enter the time of kitchen gadget temptations in the intermediate phase. And you start like, you get the egg steamer, you get the food processor, you get the bread maker, you get the, like the little dirly woolly thing that makes spiralizes your vegetables. You start your kitchen kind of goes if you don't say no to some of these things. You get the sous vide, you get the steam canner, like you get all these things, and then you find yourself only using a portion of those things, and there's a lesson in that. So during this phase, it's not bad to get gadgets. Like I actually have an egg steamer, and people could make fun of me for that, and I actually could get rid of the egg steamer and use my sous vide for that, right? But for me, because I make deviled eggs once a week when eggs are in season, it's super easy to slam some eggs in that thing, turn them on, and go off and start working on my show notes. And then once I've done that, it has a buzzer that goes off. Get one with a buzzer if you're going to do this. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem, or one that turns itself off. I come out and I throw it in an ice water bath, and then I make the deviled eggs later that day. For me, that's a system that works from beginning to end and doesn't create a mess. And so I have chosen to keep that device in my life. But some devices I've gotten rid of. I had a flour grinder that I got during this intermediate phase, and it was because I was baking bread. And the flour grinder was awesome. It was an electric one, and T gave it to me because he used to have it and he was going to throw it away. And I was like, well, I'll use it. And then eventually I sold it or traded it to somebody, I can't remember, at Jack Spirko's fall workshop. And I brought it down to them, and they're using it now. So it's stayed in the community. But I, during the intermediate phase, realized that in order to be healthier, I needed to cut grains out of my diet almost completely. And sometime I'll talk about the ketogenic diet and why, like I'll go back into why that happened and how that happened and my thoughts on diets for other people. I'm a little less everybody should eat this way than Karen Berry is, for example. But I do think that for me, it's worked really well for my metabolism. And that means that I get massive inflammation when I eat wheat. That's basically what happens. So I don't need to store wheat. I don't need to grind wheat. I don't need to bake bread. And the things in my kitchen related to all of that was a flour grinder, a KitchenAid mixer, a bread maker, and then buckets of grain. Now, caveat, and this goes back to knowing what you actually use. I have somebody who lives with me from time to time named Mama Sauce. And Mama Sauce uses flour. She doesn't use a lot of flour, but she uses flour. And so what I figured out, because I started thinking about, like, I have 4 appliances that I use once in a while when Mama Sauce is here. I could get rid of the flour grinder. I could get rid of the KitchenAid mixer. I could get rid of the bread maker. So that's 3 big things, right? And just have one blender that is also capable of grinding flour. So I made that decision, got rid of the flour grinder, rejigged audited my pantry to see, like, was I storing a bunch of stuff I no longer used? And I either gave that away or sort of put it in what I call use it up phase. So, like, things you're not using very much of anymore. When you get into the intermediate phase, you can still use them, but you're just using them slower, and you certainly should not be replenishing them if it's something you basically don't use. And I decided storing whole like wheat berries, because they store really long, works great with a Vitamix to be able to make flour if I want flour, or when Mama Sauce wants to bake bread. And then I got rid of the flour grinder. I still have the KitchenAid and the bread maker, but the bread maker is leaving next. But it's great, because when I used to bake bread all the time, I could, like, hit go and leave, right? It's leaving next. I still have the KitchenAid mixer because it serves other functions, but I'm pretty sure it's out of here because, like, literally it whips whipping cream or stuff like that. And I can mix, like, ground meat with it. And the reason it's still here is I might still use it to mix ground meat, but my meat grinder also does that. So I'm probably going to get rid of it. And I put that on what I call the year of, it's like it's on probation. And if I don't use it for a year, it's out. And I have a really nice KitchenAid Pro level, like, mixer, because I used to use it all the time. But now if I make cookies or bread, like, I literally can just do that with my hands. And there's no reason to, like, dedicate this whole part of my kitchen to it if I'm not going to use the thing. So then you get into advanced. And when you get into the advanced phase, this is when you are on autopilot in your pantry. You have your methods so dialed in that every time something comes up, you know that you need to reorder it. You have lists to do that. You have methods to do that. And it's like, when you plant stuff, when you harvest stuff, how much of something you need to can every year, or dry, or freeze dry, or whatever you're doing. And then there's professional level. Professional level is when we get into, like, back into integrating inventories and RFID tags or QR codes for reordering. Like, that's a whole nother world. But I just started thinking about that because no matter where you are on the journey, realize it's a journey. Like, you don't go from I've never had a pantry to pro level in like a week. What you start with is, what do I use on that list? What is easy to store, and where can I store it? And do I have a system for that? How do I resupply, and how much do I want on hand to have, like, a 2-week buffer? Do I want a 6-month buffer? Do I want a 1-year buffer? And then you implement it with your family, and if you live with people, they have to be involved in your pantry management system, or at least not disrupting it, right? Like, it was really funny. I walked into the roasting shack the other day, and I had Michelle help me with a project this weekend. And she always reorganizes the roasting shack when she's there, which I think is awesome. One thing she did was take coffee bags out of my last box. And my method is, when I take coffee bags out of a box, I order a box, right? And she doesn't know that. So I didn't integrate her into the system. And then I walked in today and I was like, oh, that was almost empty of coffee bags, and now it's full. And that means I need to order a box. So you see how, like, if you don't integrate somebody, you won't know. Like, luckily I saw, so I didn't, like, one time I ran out of coffee bags because I wasn't paying attention. And I had to, like, go drive out and pick them up so I could do orders. It was actually, some people got some orders of, like, half-pound bags of coffee for their pounds. That I remember that one. I was like, here's your 2 half-pound bags of coffee. Sorry, man. But yeah, that was a funny time for me. And that's why you got to build some sort of communication with the people around you into what you're doing. We are going to be curing pork bellies this week. We're going to start the process so that I can have bacon for the spring workshop that's made here. The Bosturma was delicious. So the Bosturma was done, and I got it out. And I got my meat slicer out, which is stored in the way back because I don't use it a lot. And it's heavy. And so once I get it out, I'm like, what else can I slice, right? So sliced up the Bosturma. That's what I ate for the weekend when I was at the choir event, and they were feeding us pizza, and I can't eat the pizza that they were serving us, so I brought my own lunch. But I had to substitute sweet paprika with a different paprika, and so I used some of my smoked paprika and another paprika that I got from, gosh, it was a homemade one I got from Spags, actually. So that was really good. And I reduced the amount of paprika in the total like spice mix for it, just because it was going to be a lot of really fresh paprika. I have since sourced sweet paprika. I've learned how to make sweet paprika for next year so I can have some homemade stuff. But this was like, I took an eye of round from a smaller cow, and I took the whole eye of round, cut it into pieces, cured it, used my wine fridge, and it worked fantastic. So I'm going to do another cycle of that and document it better so you can see what I did. I learned this from Jack Spirko, who saw a TikTok video. And this is like, it's kind of balancing the best of both worlds between biltong and sort of like cured lunch meat. So it's something that will be on the charcuterie platter we serve at the spring workshop. I'm going to bring some for people to taste at SRF in Camden, Tennessee on April 6th and 7th. So definitely, if you're coming to those events, better, like, I don't have enough to give everybody some, but you should probably get with me in advance so I know I'm putting some aside for you, or putting one aside for you, because I'll probably do that tasting on Friday night before the event, but I might do like just have it Saturday. I'm not sure. It'll be one of those days though. So anyway, with that, it's time for the weekly shopping report. And this is from Joe in our network. And they took their usual Saturday trip and they skipped Home Depot. So doesn't look like we have a 2x4x8 price. No. 2x4x8 is $3.38. The Dollar Tree was in better shape stock wise. They're just not very consistent. And let's see. So here's Aldi. The Aldi update's always interesting because he does the staple prices. Aldi had a lot more crowds, but not too bad. There was plenty of maza and a lot more chocolate than usual. And I've noticed that too. Like, Aldi hasn't had their chocolate in, and they make these little packets of small chocolate bars, which are nice because I'm the person who, when I open a chocolate bar, I finish the chocolate bar. So it can be a big one, it can be a little one. The little ones are a little bit smaller, which is good. Or I take one and I break it in half and I hand the other half back to Tactical to put back in his house. That's how I trick myself into it. But here's the staple prices. Eggs were $2.78 a dozen. These are like base level CAFO eggs for $2.78 a dozen. So egg prices have gone up. Whole milk, $2.93. Heavy cream, $5.19. Heavy cream has also gone up. Orange juice, $3.29. Butter, $3.69. Bacon, $4.25. Potatoes, $3.99. Sugar, $3.09. Flour, $2.29. 80% lean ground beef, $3.99. That's the same as last week. And it is like you're seeing some upward pressure again, guys. Like, think about that. If you see something on sale and you know how to can it, if you know how to can meat, for example, and you see ground beef on sale, you can grab it, you can can it, and it will forever lock in that price on your ground beef. Or you can freeze it and store it in bulk, that sort of thing. When you source some of those things in bulk, that's a good way to keep your costs down. So ethanol-free regular gasoline is $3.69.9. I also have a frugality tip. So if you pay attention to the Hollow Roast socials, you will have seen a picture of somebody who sent me a picture of 2 pots of Hollow Roast from their work kitchen. And I thought that was kind of cool. It's like 2 different ones going. I guess somebody did a side-by-side test. But he also, Justin sent me that. He sent me a frugality tip. And he said, I don't usually think of this in sort of the saving money sort of way. I think about it more in the using it all up sort of way, but it ends up being a very similar end. And the tip is something else to do with that end of the bar of soap that you have by the sink or in the shower. When the little piece is getting slim, it gets hard to hold on to, and a lot of people throw that away. What he does is use the technique of scoring learned from pottery to attach the little piece to the next bar of soap. So what he does is get both bars wet and soapy, like when you're in the shower anyway, and then use a comb to scratch marks in both pieces and then puts them together. uh, you can use a comb, you can use anything, holds them firmly with no gaps, and then tries not to let them slide around at this point, sort of like welding them together with the cross hatches. And then once they've been pressed together, puts them in the soap dish to dry, and that holds that last little piece on there so that the rest of the soap gets used up. Now, we've had other soap use it up, like people turning it into hand soap and everything, but this is another thing you can do, and that's super easy if you're in the shower anyway and you happen to have a comb in your shower. So I thought that was a pretty cool tip. Thanks, Justin. Next up, we have a new segment, and this is the community highlight. And this one goes back to what to do when you disappoint people, because you will disappoint people in your life. And I know that in the last year or two, I've disappointed some people. And what it goes down to is that, and this is why I chose the word hone for this year, I get eager and I say yes, and I want to do stuff, and people think I'm going to do stuff. And then I get buried under a ridiculously long to-do list. And then I either do things a lot later than I need to, or I don't do it. And as a result of that, a lot of people have forgiven me for a lot of mistakes in the last 12 months. And I'm really thankful for that, because what I had not built into my life plan was what to do when things like, how do I say this? When there's like an emotional crisis. Like, I didn't have that in my plan. I had like, I'm pretty good at getting a lot of things done. I'm pretty good at delegating things. But when people in my life die, it hurts. And I need time to process that. And I process the way I process alone. But if what I'm doing is hyper production during that time, I'm not processing anything. And I had 3 family deaths last year. I had another one a week ago. Just, and a lot of illness and a lot of, yeah, just a lot of hard stuff to deal with. That was just on the family side. There was a lot of things going on. And I had said yes to a lot of things last year because I was all excited to grow. And what happened is I would do things like be like, "Oh, I'm going to check out this thing and then I'm going to talk about it on my podcast." And then I would like not write it down right. Like, I have stuff in boxes right now that are not opened because I didn't want to even open the thing and look at the thing until I was ready to follow through on making a video or whatever. And a few people have stopped listening to my podcast because of this, by the way, because I disappointed them. And I'm sorry for that. But also, this podcast is about building the life you choose. And it's about taking control of your life and your mental health and your relationships and your homestead and all of those things. And I've developed a whole life planning method because I disappointed people and things got out of control. Like, the My 3 Things method exists to keep me from getting myself into that situation. And like different times in my life, I've gotten myself into that situation. That's why I developed the method. And so when you do it, the best you can do is apologize. You may not even know who all you disappointed. But then you need to take accountability for it. And what I realized over the Christmas break as I was thinking about this was I needed to be clearer about timelines on some things, like hollow roast coffee. Back when we just had a few orders at a time, I would roast every single day and ship every single day. But if I'm going to do the podcast and the coffee, there are days where now I can't. It doesn't make sense to roast and try to do the podcast. Just it doesn't work. So I reduced the number of days I roast. I communicated that to customers. Probably not all of them realized it. And I ship on Mondays and Thursdays, usually, unless it's Friday. But if we get a power outage on a Thursday, I can't roast. And so then like things jig around, which means like the turnaround time on orders is a little bit longer than it used to be. And I don't have plans to change that right now. Like if there's one thing in the works actually that would impact that, and it's related to outsourcing basically. But I had to get real with how much a solopreneur can do and also not make herself sick. So I started making some changes and communicating them. That's what you do. And then the things you can't manage, you just don't. Like you have to admit it and you have to own it and you have to make amends as best you can. And one of the things that I most often dropped the ball on is I would see somebody in our community doing something really cool, like starting a podcast or starting a project. And they wouldn't even necessarily know I was going to cross promote them, but I wanted to cross promote them, or maybe they knew. And I couldn't figure out how to build that in. Because like it'd be great if I could just spend a half hour or hour, writing up a thing and making a post and doing a graphic and putting it out on the website and having also listened to 5 or 6 episodes of the thing they're doing so that I am like informed on that. But the way like I started when I was drilling down on like Hone, I started documenting what I do every 15 minutes of the day. And the reason I can't fit more stuff in is I can't fit more stuff in. And that includes listening to more stuff. Like I have a certain amount of time I can listen to stuff and I do my best to listen. Like today I was able to hop in on a live stream with the Lots Project. Like that was really cool. And he was clearly super happy I dropped in there. Well, it was because I took my morning walk later because it's the day after my choir concert and I had scheduled a less busy Monday morning. And I was really happy to hop in too, because it's like I happened to jump in like right at this moment when he was talking about something I knew about. I'm like, oh, I can actually answer that question. So it was kind of cool. But I thought, you know what I could do is set up a new segment called the Community Highlight. Now, right now it's on Monday. It may move around. But today, because I know I've disappointed people, anybody who I've disappointed who I haven't personally apologized to, I'm sorry. I'm sure I've missed some people. But what I did to make amends for it isn't something specific to anybody. It was I figured out a way to build into what we do, ways to better communicate some of the cool stuff y'all are doing. And I call it the community highlight. And what I'm going to do is once a week highlight a project, a channel, a product, like something that people are doing in our network so that you're aware of it, but also so they get a little boost. And this one is near and dear to my heart because we did our first project accelerator with Toolman Tim and Strong Roots Resources and Hack My Solar and all of that. And it was with somebody who was in our network for a while, and she kind of went away for a bit and had some children. And, the first few years of having children is busy. And she popped back in. And she's like, but how do I monetize my superpower? Because we're talking about finding your passion. And she spreads joy and happiness. And she would make a really good accountability coach, by the way, if you ever wanted to hire somebody to keep you motivated. She does it in a way that's like joyful. And she can talk about some really, really dark stuff in a happy way and with some optimism about, yeah, this is bad, but this is what you can do. And as a result of the accelerator, she had some next steps. We had some commitments. Toolman Tim said, if you put a segment together every week, I'll run it on my show. And he has. And she has launched a YouTube channel, created the whole brand, and is putting out, I'm so proud of her. She is putting out on the regular content, which is just an analysis of one news thing. And she calls it Sunshine Prepper. So I'm going to show you guys on the screen here, Sunshine Prepper's YouTube account. And It's got, she's got weekly videos here. She's got a really cool brand. It's like a little happy flame in a circle. And she does these short segments. Like the first one was 6 minutes, the second one was 7 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. So they're like small things. They come out once a week, usually Wednesday or Thursday on her channel. And her YouTube channel is at Sunshine Prepper TN because she's out of Tennessee. She's got 43 subscribers right now. So a lot of people have heard her segments on Toolman Tim's podcast. But you know what you can do? You can do a community member a favor right now by going to Sunshine Prepper, either by clicking in the link in the show notes or at Sunshine Prepper TN on YouTube, and giving her a subscribe, because once she gets to 100 subscribers, she gets a little bit more functionality on YouTube. Also, her segments are hilarious. So if you want to hear something about the news in a really fun way, like check out Sunshine Prepper, and you just won't regret it. And you'll be supporting one of our community members. She will also be at the Living Free in Tennessee Spring Workshop if you want to just sort of hear her story, because she's coming to share her progress and what she's done in the first quarter of 2024 after deciding to change what she was going to do. Our last segment before I start talking about garlic, I know this is a long show, before I start talking about garlic, is Operation Independence. This is where we talk about building local ongoing revenue into your life and skills to reduce the need to pay a guy to do a thing, which means you don't have to earn 30% more to pay the guy to do the thing. Here's something to think about as a homesteader. And I see a wave of homesteaders going through this right now. Like they've been homesteading for a year or two or three. They have done what most homesteaders do that we always tell you not to do, that we do too anyway, which is they've started too many things at once. And they've learned how to do all these things. And now they're maintaining all this stuff and they're losing their minds. And they're realizing that they're losing their money too on some of the stuff. And so when you find yourself there, you need to let things go. Let it go, right? It's hard, but it's okay. So I saw somebody selling like a donkey or something online because she just doesn't need them anymore. And it's because she is focusing on the things that are working for her, her family, and her homestead. And that's great. And we're doing the same thing here. We started with sheep 2 years ago, and we're letting the rams go. We are going to cut all male sheep from our property unless they're being grown out for meat because they were born. And I started realizing that I have 2 pet goats right now. I got the goats years ago. Like the goats were a big part of the podcast when they came here. And originally I thought I'd milk them, but then I realized that with my schedule, I'm not going to milk anything on a daily schedule if I'm going to travel as much as I travel. And I don't have somebody who lives nearby who's going to do it for me. But we were using them to clear the land because my land was all brambles. And they did a great job, and they have finished that job. So now I have 2 pet goats that I pay to feed, who I really like. And I'm pretty sure it's time for them to move on to somebody else's homestead. And I have 2 choices here. I can process them and eat the meat, or I can pass them on. Now, one of them has a very sweet demeanor. She knows how to be tethered, like she's an awesome goat. The other one's kind of skittish. So we may be going 2 different directions with the goats, but I haven't committed to this change yet, but I'm pretty sure I need to let them go and reclaim that part of my homestead for the sheep, because the goats and the sheep are not able to be together because, well, the goat has horns and the sheep do not. And they don't, I mean, like they'll get along through a fence, but I don't need horned goat head-butting bellies of pregnant sheep, right? So I'm just, that's what's happening. It's basically we're refining our homestead income right now. Speaking of homestead income, planting and cultivating garlic is one of the easiest things you can do if you do it well, to not have to buy garlic ever again and to have something that truly pays for itself. And the investment to get started is time and some seed garlic. And you can spend $100 on seed garlic, guys, to do this. Like seed garlic ain't cheap, but it's definitely something worth thinking about, especially if you like to cook with garlic. The reason this segment even exists, though, is I was on YouTube talking about being garlic self-reliant, and somebody said, "Please tell me what you do because I've been trying with garlic and I've been failing with garlic." And I wrote back, "I'm going to do a show." I think I wrote back, "I'm going to do a show on this because it's not something that I can just write in a comment and it's done, right?" So why would you want to be garlic self-reliant? Because it's one less thing to spend money on, because you're more connected with the land when you grow your food, and fresh garlic tastes different than store garlic. Not kidding. Your stored garlic that you eat at this time of year, that's just about ready to go, to be done for its life, that might taste close to store garlic, but, like, the flavor you get from home processing garlic is a totally different world. Like, my homemade garlic powder is so when I do recipes, I'm like, "This much garlic powder." I'm like, "Oh, wait. No, but if it's store garlic powder, like, a whole lot more of that store stuff because that stuff's stale as can be." Yeah, it's a different experience, and it's also something that has multiple uses, like, medicinally, it's my antimicrobial. It's got an antibiotic effect on people. Like, I'm not saying, necessarily if you need some serious antibiotics not to just use the garlic, but it is something that you can use when you don't have access to other things. And it's just darn delicious. And it's so easy to grow. And you get garlic scapes. Like, that's a whole nother thing I didn't even put in my show notes. So there are lots of reasons to do it, and you don't need a lot of space to grow garlic. I grow all of the garlic I could ever need and more, and end up with a surplus. And I do events here where we cook things fresh in 130, 25-foot row of garlic. Now I do four four garlic plants wide on the 30-foot row, but it's not that much space. When I go grow my garlic for kitchen use, I do not interplant it, but I do use elephant garlic, which is really an onion. But I use elephant garlic to interplant with other things throughout my garden. And the cool thing about elephant garlic in Tennessee is it is perennial. So once you put it in, you end up with these like bushes of elephant garlic. And that's like another way to add resilience in. And they put out pretty flowers. So you can actually landscape with this and it's fine. It's, people won't necessarily realize it's garlic once if you let it grow as just like a bushy garlic gnarl. It's fine. So the next question is, how do you choose which garlic to grow? And everybody's like, do you grow hardneck or softneck? And my answer is yes, I do. Soft neck garlic does not store as long in the pantry. And it can be more sensitive to colder climates. So the best way to choose your garlic is to talk to some people who grow garlic in your area and ask them which varieties they grow, or just get a bunch of garlic and whatever survives, survives. Now, the hardneck garlic I find is hardier to grow, and it's what puts out the scape. The hardneck garlic puts out the scape. You end up with this like hard stem in the middle of your garlic, and that's why it's called hardneck garlic. The softneck garlic doesn't have that. I personally prefer using hardneck garlic, but I grow both. And the reason I grow both is I have a random collection of garlics that used to be certain varieties that I have all mixed together based on selective breeding of my garlic. That like when I harvest one that's music, I can tell it's music. Like they're not cross pollinating, but I can tell it's music because of the color of the skin. When I harvest a chestnut, I can tell it's chestnut. But a lot of my garlic is random garlic I got from local farmers here, bought at the farmers market and threw it in the ground. And you can do that too. You can basically go to your farmers market, buy the garlic when they have it, which they'll usually have it out here in July. You may see it in August or so in more like, Oregon, northern climates. It just depends when it's, like it's going to be ripe at different times. People probably have it out in June in Texas area, but it'll come out to your farmer's market, and that is absolutely something you can do. Now, if you want to find some online, Seed Savers Exchange, Baker's Creek, Rare Seeds all have garlics that you can source. And they will have packets of seed for garlic, some of them, and they will have bulbs. You want to buy bulbs if you're going to do this. I've actually never tried growing garlic from seed. I also don't grow onions from seed. Like I could, but it's a whole nother phase. And if you're just getting started with garlic, don't do that to yourself. Some garlic you cannot really propagate with seeds, right? So the cool thing about garlic is it comes in a cluster of bulbs, and each bulb is an individual plant. And so if you just have one bulb one year, you can plant all of your garlics and end up with 6 to 10 plants, and you'll have 6 to 10 bulbs probably if you're successful. And then you go through and you just can propagate like that. So with the garlic, definitely propagate from the bulbs. And if you want to source it online, Baker's Creek, Seed Savers, Rare Seeds, there's a bunch of other people. You can find garlic farms that will sell you. And there's lots of different kinds. And if you start reading about them, it's really fun. It's like they have different flavor profiles. Like at one point, I was going to do a garlic tasting here with different flavor profiles from the different garlics and like roast it and put it on bread so you could taste different things. And then that was one of those things that I probably disappointed people on because it was like, wow, that's a lot of work to do. So I didn't do it. But you might be somebody who has space in your life from that. And that would not be a bad way to get people interested in your homestead and buying your garlic, by the way. It's just to do a garlic tasting for fun, right? Definitely do bulbs though. So once you've sourced the garlic, you want to prepare your planting area. And the way you do this is by making the soil well-drained, loose, nutrient-dense, loamy. Because you're growing something underground, if you put it in dense clay, they won't do great. They like to have room to move, and they do a better job of growing when they have room to move. I'm very excited about my garlic this year because I just planted it in some of the best soil I've ever had. Now, if what you have is clay, you can sort of you can till it, or you can carefully hand turn it and build in some organic matter to make it better. I used to put gypsum in Oregon. Like I'd dig down about a foot, put a layer of gypsum in, like put in some, I think it was coconut husk or something else with a peat. It was peat moss and other stuff. And then I would make that bed the garlic bed. And then over time, I would rotate other crops through that. I would only do that treatment once to get the area ready back in the day. Lasagna mulching will get you there. Like there's lots of different ways to get there. If you have sandy soil, you need to, it's very well drained. The garlic will do okay in that, but you need to get nutrients into that then you need to get like manure and other stuff. So depending where your soil is, like very important to get it so that it's loamy, but holding moisture, but not too much moisture, well drained, and to get a good amount of nutrient in there because garlic really likes nutrient. Okay. So doing that handles most of the problems you're going to have except for one, which is that garlic doesn't love competition. We'll talk about what we do about that in a bit. It actually also keeps your soil developing well. Now, when to plant is the next question. And this is also a sliding scale based on where you are. For me, I plant like the last week of October through the end of the year is fine. If I hit the last week of October, first week of November, I have the best success rate on size of garlic, but I have planted garlic in Tennessee in the middle of winter in January and still gotten a crop. They were just smaller than I would have liked. I also one year planted late and they didn't have enough cold nights, and I ended up with garlic that didn't, like the bulb was just a single plant and never made multiple teeth. Okay, so if you go too late, that's what's going to happen. You'll still get some garlic production. Like it grew, it just didn't, it was like a big round thing. And then I saved those round things and I put them in the ground again the next fall, and they did turn into plants. So there is recovering from mistakes too. But your area may have you planting them at different times. In Oregon, it's September and October. Like, so further north, you're planting it sooner. The plants get going and then the snow comes. and you think, oh no, it's going to kill my garlic. Not if you do what you're supposed to do, right? We'll get to what you're supposed to do to make sure that to protect them from that. But here last week of December, and of October is a really good starting time. I'm sure in Texas it's a couple weeks later. So you're looking at the sliding scale. Again, the best way to find out for your area when to do this is ask somebody who grows it in your area, because they're like, every year I put it in at this time and it works great. Right? That's I can tell you that for Middle Tennessee, the last week of October is your time. We've usually already had a frost by then. Like, it's fine. You get it in there and then you do what I'm going to talk about next. So with garlic, it is very, very important when you put the garlic in. And the way you plant it is you make a little hole. And if your garlic tooth is like an inch tall, make sure it's an inch low, like there's an inch on top of it. And if it's like 3 inches tall, make sure there's an inch of soil on top of it, approximately. Some people like to trench it and just like leave it so there's a little divot for the water. I would do that in drier climates. In Tennessee, we get so much water, I keep it flat, right? So this goes back to, it does not want to sit in water. But if you're in Eastern Oregon and you don't get that much rain, then you might want to have a little way for the water to run in. That's just up to you. Loose soil though, guys, loose soil. And then on top of that soil, you need mulch. And you can mulch with leaves, you can mulch with wood chips, you can mulch with I don't know, sawdust, you can mulch with shredded paper, you can mulch with hay, you can mulch with anything. I have actually put on my garlic plantings straight up duck litter from my coop that had wood chips mixed in without letting it compost, and it's worked. I'm not going to give that as advice though. I think the reason it worked here is it rains a lot here, and the plants didn't come up for a bit, so that like most of the hot part of that had washed off by the time they came up. So that's not a recommendation. I'm just going to tell you I've done it. What I used the most is, if I get leaves off my property, the priority place where I will use it is this. I will put 3 inches of leaf mulch over the top of where I planted the garlic. And that does something very important, which is it keeps the weeds from coming up. And then the garlic doesn't have the competition of the roots from those weeds taking stuff away from it. And by weeds, I mean anything's a weed at that point for the garlic. It doesn't matter if it's chickweed or radishes or a tomato plant. Like, you just want the garlic to be the garlic in this scenario. So mulch is critical. It's also critical because it's going to break down and supply nutrient. And it is also going to help equalize the temperature and the moisture in the soil, because that layer, when it rains, or when you use a sprinkler, the water comes down and it goes under the mulch and it doesn't evaporate, so you don't dry out your soil. It also will, when on cold nights, the soil is a little bit warmer. On warm days, it's a little bit cooler. So it's actually good practice to mulch in your garden all the time, but garlic really needs to be mulched. Really, 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 really. When I have not mulched garlic, I have had failure. So just know that. Now, the other thing about mulching is you're going to mulch in the fall when you put your garlic in, and then spring is going to spring. And it sprung here. And it's time to do what? Mulch your garlic again. So at this point, your plants are probably up when spring is springing. And what I do here is I then put wood chips in. So mine, I have little plants up. I've put wood chips around them. And in places where plants weren't all the way up, they will come up through the wood chips. And it's another 2 to 3 inches of mulch. I like to use wood chips for this. I like to use the wood chips from the arborist, from the trees in the area. When I can get my hands on it, I have used bark dust. I have used pine shavings. I've used all sorts of stuff. Pine shavings were not a great result. Like, they caused a little bit of burn on the leaves for some reason. So I think I needed to compost those first, and I didn't. Hay would work here as well. Again, the key here is it's the mulch that you already put on has been breaking down. You're keeping the weeds from happening. And it's the same reason. You're keeping the soil moisture level at the right level, and you are also like the extremes of warm and cold are narrowed when you mulch. Watering is something I have not had to think about for my garlic since I lived in Oregon, because in Oregon in the summer, the rain turns off and they want about an inch of water a week if they're well mulched. So mulch it. And the way you do that is I take a tuna fish can and I put it on the ground in where I'm watering to know. Turn on a sprinkler if you're doing a sprinkler. And when that tuna can is full, I know I've watered an inch. And if I know how many minutes that was, if it was a half hour or whatever, I know that once a week the sprinkler goes on for half an hour for this area. And if it rains an inch, then I don't do it because you don't want to overwater them if you can avoid it. In Tennessee, we get more than an inch of rain a week very often. And there's nothing you can do about that. But the one thing you can do about that is not also water it. Okay. And then that just goes back to here, because we can get 4, 5, 6 inches. I need to really make sure that that soil is the right consistency and is well drained for the seeds to do well, or they will drown in their little roots and you will have a failure. Pest control, I like there are pests that can attack garlic, and if you have one attack garlic, look at what that pest is and what you need to do about it. I can't speak to that from experience because I haven't ever had a pest problem with my garlic, because most bugs don't like your garlic. Like your garlic is interplanted in your garden in order to deter pests from hitting other plants. So there's that. But the bees will love the flowers when they bloom if you let them bloom. So then we go on to when are they ready to harvest? Here's what will happen if you have hardneck garlic, not softneck garlic. At some point, so they'll put leaves up and they'll get kind of tall. And the local lore is when the bottom 2 leaves, because you'll have like a stem with leaves coming out, kind of like an onion. It's kind of looks like it also looks sort of similar to an iris, but not. But it has like, like stalks that come out. It like leaves, like almost like, I don't know, banana tree does this too, kind of. But anyway, it's the bottom 2 start turning brown. It's time to dig and look at that and see. Just take one out and see if it's toothed out. If it hasn't, you leave it in a little bit longer, and you keep your eagle eye on it until it has toothed out, because what happens is each of those big leaves that come up turn into one of your individual cloves of garlic. And I'm going to use the word clove for the single clove and the word head for the head. This is how I will talk about it for this. So you may end up with just, it's not quite ready. It hasn't toothed out, and you can kind of see where they're going to start. If that's the case, leave it in for another week and check it again. Don't check the same one you pulled out, though. Pull out a different one. I actually will pull it out. You can still cook with it. And then you can cook with it fresh out of the ground, by the way. And I'll take another one and check it. Now, I actually start checking when the first leaf goes, because what happens to me in Tennessee, because of the volume of rain, is if I don't get them out, they start wanting to rot in the ground. So I got to be careful about that personally. And that means that I keep an eagle eye on when they're ready to harvest. Okay. That's me here in a high rain area. In a drier area, you're going to be in a different place. Now, usually a week or 2 before, for the hardneck garlic, it has put up a spike to put a flower up. And this comes out curvy and has a little flower thing on the end. And if you get that, because it'll go in a circle, it'll come out and it'll circle and then it'll bloom. If you get that before it makes the full circle and you just cut that off, that is a garlic scape. Those are something you can sell at a premium at a farmer's market, and they're delicious. So you can just cut them up sort of like green beans in the saute, and it's a lighter garlic flavor, or make garlic scape. They're called garlic scapes soup. Very, very tasty way to tap into your crop. And people say, they say, if you cut the flowers off, then you will get bigger bulbs. I've never tested this, but that's what they say. I always cut them off because I want to eat them. So you'll know that, like, it's usually a week or two after the scape happens that I get my garlic. And in your climate, like, your mileage may vary on that little garlic ripening thing. Okay. So then you harvest your garlic. And the way I like to harvest it is by using a pitchfork and try not to stab them to get them out. I used to use shovels, and I had a lot of garlic heads that were cut in half. And then those you eat right away. If you're doing it more in like single rows, you can kind of get up under some of them. Like sometimes I can just pull them straight out because the soil is so soft just by pulling up on their stalks, as long as the stalks haven't gone too brown. But like last year, we had so much rain that my stalks were just basically rotting, and I had to go in with the pitchfork and get them out. And then once you process them, once you get them out, you do not hose them off. You put them in racks with the dirt. Like, I'll bang off some of the dirt, but I don't wash the dirt off. I put them on racks to dry in a dark area, a place that's not getting direct sunlight. It's actually, I do it under my carport. I used to do it in my house. My house smelled like garlic for weeks. And for 2 weeks, you're letting it air out. So you don't want them stacked on top of each other. You kind of want them on racks. If you don't have racks, you can hang them up. There are many ways to, like, you could just put it flat on a table and then a week later turn them all over. Like, there's lots of different ways to use. I use one of my clothes drying racks that folds out. It's like the European style that folds out. That works great for drying garlic. But I have dried them on screens. I have tied them together on ropes in bunches. Like, there's lots of things you can do to dry your garlic. You can put it just out flat on your kitchen table if you want to, but you will smell, your whole house will smell like garlic if you do that. There's just no way around that. And that's how you process them. So what's happening during that time is the outer skin is drying and it becomes that hard skin that you take off garlic. If you cook with garlic before you process it, which is totally acceptable, that's green garlic, it will peel like a banana. And I will totally cook with fresh garlic and peel it like a banana. It's totally fine. It's just the outer husk hasn't dried. The reason you want to dry that is for storage. That helps keep it fresh longer in your storage. So the way you store fresh garlic, once it's dried, I cut off the stem, and then I, like, if there's any dirt, I just sort of rough it off with my finger if I care. And I get it like out of the roots. This is the motion for out of the roots, right? And then I put it in a breathable box. Like an onion bag would work great. I use apple boxes for mine most often. I have put them in milk crates, like a couple garlics deep. And then I store it in my prepper pantry. So that's how you store fresh garlic. You want to have it not exposed to light, and you want to have a cooler temperature. Don't put it in your fridge though. So you're looking at, like, I'll have it in a 45-degree room, basically, or so. That's what my prepper pantry sits at, 45 to 55 degrees. And then it stores in that state. This time of year, it starts growing a little bit, most of it. And then I when it does that, I do what's next, other ways to store garlic. So then I'll take it, I'll slice it up, I'll put it either in the Excalibur food dehydrator, or I'll freeze dry it. You can actually dry it at room temperature, but a dehydrator works better. And if you're going to do that, I run it through a food processor, so it's in small pieces. I do not run it through the blender, because then you end up with like garlic fruit leather, or very dry garlic, like powder. So then I take the dried garlic and I store that with a moisture absorber in a mason jar. And if I want garlic powder, I will take those bits and I will grind them further, a little bit at a time, to use. And the reason I do it that way is if you actually powderize it after you've dried it, it will clump together unless you use an anti-clumping agent. And I don't want anti-clumping agents in my spices. So I sort of grind it in a food mill as I need it. Freeze-dried garlic, though, it's easier to grind, and you can put that in a pepper grinder. And I totally learned that trick from Chef Brett. So How do you choose garlic for replanting? And here's part of the cycle. Like here, I end up harvesting in June or July for my garlic. And then I'm replanting in October and I'm storing it in the prepper pantry through the summer. And it's actually still in the prepper pantry right now. And it is now March. Okay. So I'm still able to eat fresh garlic that I harvested almost a year ago. Okay. So um the way you choose it for planting is I actually choose the bulblets that are the ones I want the most, which are the biggest ones to replant. And then the quote unquote culinary garlic are the smaller ones. And I'm doing this so that the stronger plants propagate themselves. You can choose any garlic for replanting though from your garlic. You just want something that is still viable and not dried, right? So you want it to be you leave the husk on it. Um, you leave it in the bowl in the head of garlic. You don't separate them for storage. You leave it in the head. They last better that way. Kind of like keeping the pit in the avocado helps keep it from going bad in your fridge. And then you choose the best ones and you replant those, and every one of those is another plant. So if you figure out I use 100 garlic plants a year in my cooking, then make sure you plant 120 just in case some don't go, right? And then you just when you're ready to plant, that's when you break them out of the heads of garlic and you plant them. It's pretty much that simple. That's how you become garlic self-reliant. And something I wanted to do years ago that I'm never going to do that I'm just going to throw out there. If you want to have a homestead business, an idea I've always had is a garlic of the month club where you take a different variety of garlic every month and mail it to people because it's so easy to store, right? So then you got to grow 12 varieties of garlic, send it out with a nice little card with a recipe on like what this garlic's good for and how to treat it and blah, 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 and tasting notes. That would make a great Christmas present. Or you could do 6 months only. You could do like the first 6 months of the year or the first 5 months of the year starting in December. If you do that, you want to have a very thoughtful talk with yourself about what your cold storage looks like though, because you want to make sure you're going to want that at an ideal temperature, ideal humidity level, and then they won't start growing again. They'll stay dormant. That's what you want to be able to do sort of that of the month club. So anyway, that's everything I know about how to plant and cultivate garlic. If you've got more questions, like if I unearth questions as this, please send them to me, Nicole at livingfreeintennessee.com. But it's very easy to become garlic self-reliant if you just do a little bit of work on a schedule. If you like the show and want to support the work I'm doing here, you can do it in 2 ways. 1, get your coffee at Hollow Roast, and 2, consider becoming a member. Head over to Living Free in Tennessee to find out more. With that, guys, go out